Welcome to the MULTIVAC podcast, the place for the food industry to get the answers to their most frequently asked questions. Brought to you by the market-leading process and packaging machinery business, MULTIVAC. Each episode, we're hosted by a team of industry experts, so sit back, grab a coffee and join us for our next discussion. So I wanted to look at a bit of a trend that we're certainly seeing in the industry, which is what I'm dubbing lightweighting.
Yeah.
So previously, the classic would be to down gauge a bit of plastic and maybe save 20% on your plastic content. What we've been really seeing is like big down gauging. So focusing on lightweighting. So taking away as much. So Chris, if you bring the samples up of what the existing pack is, for example, so like a mono-rigid polyester tray. Packaging can be anything from chicken pieces, as you see there. If you're listening, there's an MAP pack that, you know, ready to eat sort of pack, chicken pieces. Or mince. Mince is the classic one. And everyone knows about the mince project that recently happened, going from big trays, traditional big trays like this, into the smaller vacuum packaging, flexible packaging. So to like bring that round into an OPRL standpoint, we've gone from a rigid collection at curbside pack, apart from the top web, into a pack that's now returned to supermarkets.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a huge trend that we're seeing. Chris, if you bring up the mince packs and the other ones, and the other way of doing it is to then maybe replace the polyester with a paper or something like to keep the rigidity, but reduce the amount of plastic involved.
Yeah.
And is this something that you're seeing quite a lot as well, inquiries with customers and things?
Yeah, hugely. And I would say, you know, in some instances, people are even going further and looking to remove plastic altogether to replace it with a different material. And this is where I have a bit of a struggle. And I think it's because from OPRL, we look at it purely from the point of view of recyclability. And you're right, you know, I look at this and think, oh, this is lovely and nicely recyclable and I can stick it in my bin at home. I look at this and I think, oh, well, that's a little bit more complicated because as we've said.
So like the flexible mince pack is more complicated.
Because it involves the consumer doing something else because they've got to, you know, if it's a recyclable packaging, they still have to take it back to the supermarket. And we know that can be a bit of a barrier and put people off.
Sure.
But that's me looking at it from the recyclability lens, and these decisions are not made from recyclability, are they? You know,
it's one element of
exactly.
it. Yeah, it's definitely a big driver of it now. It never used to be, but it certainly is probably the main driver.
Yeah.
Or we can reduce your plastic content, and the next question is it recyclable? And if it isn't, it's normally a no, that the project's not going to go anywhere.
So strangely enough, so a lot of the conversation, I'm learning a lot through what we're discussing. But I did a study on the flexible mince pack myself, actually. And not only is it a reduction in the plastic and the weight, but I also looked into the CO2 emissions in manufacturing it, the transportation, because obviously you get a lot more mince packs on a pallet when you're delivering it to the store. And when you looked at all of that, it makes a huge difference. However, when I discussed it with my wife, she was like, oh, yeah, it's great. You know, we're reducing plastics, we're saving the planet, et cetera, et cetera. And then she went, oh, is it recyclable? And I went, no. And she's like, and then it just turned her off the whole packaging concept completely.
And that is really difficult because, you know, a lot of these decisions are being made for this huge amount of work and effort going into making the right decisions. How you then communicate that to the consumer in a really straightforward, simple, easy to understand way that doesn't bamboozle them and explains the reasons for doing everything is really, really tricky. I mean, we've seen examples recently of people who have moved from what I would class as an ideally recyclable, you know, it might be a plastic bottle, for example, and they've gone into a multi-material container instead.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
And, you know, we see other examples of people moving to kind of paper-based bottles, but the fibre content is only about 50%. And from my point of view, I'm thinking, hang on, I don't get that. I don't understand the reasons.
Because you understand the technicalities of it.
Yes.
And the back the back process of why that isn't the best ideal choice. However, from a consumer point of view, looks great, doesn't it?
Yeah,
on the shelf.
But I understand it from a recyclability point of view. I have to be honest, I don't know about the carbon impact of various different things, you know, or even the water impact. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about the water impact. And so there's a huge amount behind it all that we don't necessarily know or see. I don't know whether we need to understand it all, but I do think we're missing a trick in some instances of really kind of shouting about why we've made these decisions and why we're making these changes. I do think there is a bit of a trend in some instances. There has been an anti-plastic trend. You know, we do know there are some groups out there who are very anti-plastic, and I don't think they help.
They certainly don't help because they certainly don't always look at the facts.
Yes.
Of a holistic approach.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, you know, that information gets to the consumer as well, and that doesn't help. So it's quite tricky in that respect, making it clear.
It's really hard when you look at one of these projects because we know base webs of a mince tray, highly recyclable product, highly recycled content product as well, really important. But then when we really look at the sums and the maths on and take the mince project as an example, Chris, what are we talking about? Some of the statistics are unbelievable. Is it 8,000 tons of CO2 saved a year?
Yeah, about 8,000 tons.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
And that's just from that's not just the plastic reduction, because that comes in somewhere around the 50-60% mark, depending on what you measured it previously to. But that is transport. So you get more
emissions from the trucks.
So less trucks on the road, less shelf space, improved shelf life, which often doesn't get talked about.
So you've got a CO2 data that's connected with producing the beef. So it's around about 60 kilograms of CO2 per 1 kilo of producing beef.
Wow.
So when you take that into the food waste, because with the flexible pack, you're increasing it from 7 days to 14 days, and in some instances 21 days.
Yeah.
So you're spanning 2 weekends
Which
in a
is
supermarket
huge.
shelf.
Yeah.
That's huge.
So you've got more opportunity for the consumer to buy it, so you're wasting less. And when you add up all of those figures, it is huge. But I also think that there's an element of everybody trying to be carbon neutral or net zero carbon. And I think that's helping the recycle industry as well. And it's helping OPRL, I think, as well, because everybody's looking at CO2 and everybody's looking at sustainability. And that all ties in with the materials that we're using.
Yeah, I agree. I guess part of me thinks that we need to go further as an industry and explain to people that net zero is not just about recyclability.
No, exactly.
It's about these other things as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that we all need to do. I think, you know, and probably government too need to really we need to start talking about that more.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it has to be easy, doesn't it? It has to be easy for use. So like take the paper, we were talking about this offline a little bit. The paper can be when it's got the plastic covering, because we need the plastic. It's really important to remember we need the plastic in our type of products, protein type products, you know, with a lot of water content. You can't just put paper around that. That's just going to disintegrate in 2 seconds. And the plastic really does increase shelf life. So you're talking 7 days to 14 to 21 days. That's really why packaging is there, not just as a dust cover. But the functionality is a really important part. So the paper products look lovely on the shelf, don't they? They look fantastic. But sometimes the plastic is really hard to separate. And if the plastic isn't separated, recyclability goes out the window.
Yeah.
So I know that you've got a lot of guidelines on plastic, paper sort of ratios and separation and things.
Absolutely. Yeah, the critical thing for us is, if that material, let's say, if that's going to a fibre reprocessor, they want to have a good quantity of fibre out of that. Because if they're paying for a ton of material and only 40% of that ton is fibre, then they're paying for 60% of something that they've got to throw away.
It's a really good point.
Which is, it's just not viable. It's never going to work if you're doing it that way. So it is, but at the same time, like you said, I talk about these barriers. We need to make sure that what we do is easy for the consumer. We always talk about, if you're having to separate a piece of packaging, separate components, can you do it without using some sort of tool, a pair of scissors or a knife?
Yeah.
It needs to be easy and it needs to be straightforward for people.
I think that's why the Mince project has highlighted this, for me anyway, when I was looking at different types of packaging, and when we were going through that process with a customer, paper wasn't the viable option because one, we know it's much more expensive than the plastic option, but two, it's that extra engagement that you have to do. And is it really going to happen Whereas now, take your mints out, rinse the packaging off, take it back to the supermarket, and it's recyclable. It's only one step. I know you have to go back to the supermarket, but you don't have to separate. Have I got this right? It removes that confusion and makes things a lot simpler.
Yeah,
it just made sense on that one. It's amazing how that project has been the catalyst for this what I'm naming lightweighting. So we're talking. I did some sums the other day where you can take 45% of CO2 out of a pack, your carbon footprint from a pack, just by going from a robust polyester tray into a lighter weight material, and product looks the same and everything. But the problem with that is the packaging looks cheaper.
Yeah,
and that's the issue then you have with the supermarket marketeers and the branding teams, is how do you make something look that is fundamentally looks and feels and tactile is cheaper product, isn't technically a cheaper product, but looks a cheaper product, to then get that on the shelf to then increase or not let sales drop, because that is king in supermarkets.
But I think it's historically, when you look at, like you've touched on it there, so in a flexible packaging, it is more the value range of products. And when you go to the more higher end products, that's when you start getting the paper, a cardboard sleeve, a cardboard label, those sorts of things that make it look high end, and then they charge more for it. Why can't you just go with a lighter weight plastic that all looks the same, but you have different grades of product in there, but it's all reducing the plastic, reducing the weight, and better for the planet.
And then get the message right.
Yeah, exactly.
On the shelf, that's key.
Yeah. And the change can happen. If you think about a few years back, we used to have everything in black plastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it looked good. And now we don't. We've moved away from black plastic.
Black is always known now as evil.
Exactly, because it can't be recycled.
That was overnight as well, wasn't it?
Pretty much.
Literally.
So, it's not that the change can't happen. It's just sometimes people get a bit, oh, no, I'm not sure about this to start with. But
but in one way, I suppose when you had a black tray, you instantly knew you couldn't recycle it. So you didn't need a label on it, didn't you? So you just go, it's black, so I'm just going to bin it.
People still put them in.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's a trend that's going to continue. I can't see it going any other way.
I think certainly for the time being, until we have this kind of clarification through the EPR again, as I keep going on about, but I really do think that is going to help with giving us these kind of different recyclability levels for materials. I think that will really help drive people. But still at the same time, that's one part, that's the recyclability. And the net zero element is so important that I do think you're right, the lightweighting, the need to reduce the amount of material that we're using is going to keep pushing on.
Yeah. And of course, the less plastic we use, but the same functionality, the less resource we're using, the less oil that we're using, it's all those knock-on effects. So just to finish up, to thank Alice for being here.
No
great
problem.
having you.
Really appreciate it. No, genuinely, really interesting. Brilliant. Right. Thank you very much. And that is the end of our podcast for the OPRL podcast. Thank you for listening, watching. If you like the content, thumbs up, smash the like button, as the kids say, and follow us. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.
See ya.
Bye.